Welcome to the Moss Report with your host, Dr. Ralph W. Moss.
Welcome to the Moss Report podcast. This is your host, Ralph Moss. Today we have a very special and much anticipated guest, Gurdev Parmar, ND, from British Columbia, Fort Langley, British Columbia. And Gurdev is one of the leaders of the field of integrative oncology or naturopathic oncology in particular. He's a naturopathic doctor specializing in cancer, and he'll tell us all about himself and about his career. But basically, he is the co-founder with his wife and partner, Dr. Karen Parmar, of the largest naturopathic clinic in Canada. And it was founded more than 20 years ago, now in its 21st year. Hard to believe, since it seems like yesterday that you just started up, Gurdev. But he's one of the people that I admire most probably in the field of cancer treatment that I admire the most. So it's a great honor and privilege to have you on the show. Welcome.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Moss. I can tell you that we have a mutual admiration society because I have a great deal of respect for you, and I've been following your work for many, many years, and it's a great honor and privilege for me to be on your show.
Thank you. I was writing some things last night. I'm always writing some things on every night, and um, I realized what a tremendous affinity I have now for the field of naturopathic oncology. I mean, those two words really hadn't been put together quite in that form. I mean, until fairly recently, I would say, but it kind of encapsulates what I believe in terms of approaching cancer, and I think this is the missing link in a way to the best of proper treatment of cancer patients worldwide. So that's why I mean, I don't have to, flatter you. I mean, I'm just telling you from the heart it's sort of been a revelation for me that all the things that I've been striving for 45 years now to see accomplished have sort of come together. And I think one of the key critical moments of this was your publication uh, last year of the textbook of naturopathic oncology. I think I might have said at the time uh, when I wrote a blurb for your book that I felt that, or maybe I didn't write you this, but I felt like this was sort of the equivalent to the moment when the DeVita Hellman Rosenberg textbook on cancer came out and gained almost universal support. In other words, you could see in one place what the thinking was of the top people in the field. And I think with the textbook of naturopathic oncology, you were the sort of the main writer and the editor in chief of, and Tina Kazor was another major editor, and then you had contributions from other fellows of your society. It kind of put, in a way, it kind of put the field on the map. It gave it a definition that I don't think it had up until that point. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I do, Dr. Moss. I think that the publication of the Textbook of Naturopathic Oncology is something that's been a long time coming. There's wonderful texts out there already from some of my colleagues that have been very important along my career path.
Hmm.
Um, but I will say that this textbook, um, for the first time, defined the field of naturopathic oncology from its very basic foundations all the way through to the best evidence informed, evidence guided, evidence based
Hmm.
approaches to the 24 most common cancer types and um, brought together, basically our profession's approach to the management of the most common symptoms experienced by people living with cancer. And it's called a desktop guide for a reason.
Mhm.
I have been traveling. I have a copy of my own book, and I have been traveling to and from my home to the office and back with my textbook and my laptop every single day since publication.
Mhm.
And I find myself thumbing through the book during my consultations with my patients every day. And it
Mhm.
is truly a desktop guide. It's been transformative for my practice, and my sincere hope is that it's been transformative for my colleagues. And Dr. Moss, I'm very happy that the textbook has been purchased by many, many medical oncologists,
Mhm.
radiation oncologists, integrative medical doctors from across North America, Europe, Asia, and it's getting out there. And I'm very, very pleased with what we have been able to accomplish with this textbook.
As well, you should be. And I just to add to the endorsement, I would say, without exaggeration, that probably a day doesn't go by that I'm not looking in the book and reading and looking at your recommendations. So I think it's very much needed. Um, I don't want, I know I'm not going to make any invidious comparisons, but I'm wondering, what do you think about Neil McKinney's encyclopedic guide to naturopathic oncology? How would you compare or contrast the work you did with his now fourth edition of his book?
So that's one of the books that I mentioned earlier that has been important through my career. Um, Dr. McKinney has done an incredible job of bringing together um, what would be considered, traditional naturopathic approaches to cancer, and it's been well received and widely accepted amongst the profession that this is one of the texts out there that uh, people can rely on to get information when they're managing people living with cancer. I think the greatest point of comparison that I would make is the textbook of naturopathic oncology um, is referenced. There's over 2,800 references in this textbook, which is obviously an enormous amount of scientific support. And every statement of fact is supported by a reference, the
Yeah,
best evidence that we have. And I think that's probably the greatest point of comparison that I would make.
yeah.
And then the other is that the introductory chapters of the textbook do a lot to bring together our naturopathic philosophy, the foundations of our profession, um, and how those apply in an oncology setting. And chapter 4, for example, is a very thorough dissection of all of the quote unquote anti-cancer diets that have come and gone over the last number of decades, and I know you've been watching these come and go as well.
Yes.
um, and being able to dissect those, look at the actual data that supports each and every one of them, what components of those diets actually may not be the best idea, and then what are the common threads amongst all of these different uh, anti-cancer diets, and what can we shake out of it? When you put these all together into a bucket and you shake the bucket out and you see what drops out at the bottom, what's the common threads amongst all of these varied approaches? And
Hmm.
I didn't have a reference like this in my practice, Ralph. And
No.
uh, truth be told, this textbook of naturopathic oncology was something that was born out of necessity. I
Yes.
felt like we all needed something that brought together this incredible field into one reference.
Yeah, well, it's like the old adage that you should write the book that you want to read. and
Eh,
or that you need to read. So
right.
I think that's what you did, right? It wasn't just, oh, I think this will sell X number of copies. It was, I need this book. I want to see this, and then so it's a learning experience for you. But I totally agree with your analysis, and I totally enjoy Neil McKinney's book. By the way, I think it's an amazing experience to read that and to see his opinions coming out of so many years of practice in your neck of the woods too, right?
Correct.
He's in Victoria, but uh, same province, and but I had the feeling, and I hope to have him on the podcast one of these days too. I had the feeling that we were sort of looking at the past of naturopathy, as grand and great as that is. And with your book, it's sort of looking at the present or the future, meaning that oncology evolved, the care of cancer patients, let's say, evolved towards evidence-based medicine within oncology as a whole. And with the great frustration I have with his book is precisely the frustration I don't have with your book. If you recommend or you say that something is beneficial, well, there's the reference right there. We know exactly where you're going and what you're making the statement. With him, it's like if he says something, this is, it's great to take gamma vitamin E with green tea. I don't know where to go to find that information, to find the verification of the justification of that. Whereas if you make that statement, you meaning the editors of the textbook, um, I know that you're going to provide me with the reference for that, and I can then double check that. I can see if I agree with you or don't agree. But when somebody makes a statement, as wise as they are and as great as their experiences, and they're probably right, and it's worth following them, but it's more like the old way that medicine used to be practiced a long time ago, when you had great men, or usually they were men, or it could be women, of course, um, who would make these grand statements, and everybody followed them because they were the great people, who were the wise people. So, do you agree with that? I'm sorry to be speechifying here, but I just,
No,
yeah,
not at all. I can absolutely appreciate exactly what you're saying,
yeah,
Ralph. I do largely agree with you. I can tell you that um, that was a major. You mentioned the birth of naturopathic oncology
yeah.
as a profession. You're right. This is a young burgeoning profession. We're
Mhm,
just at the beginnings of developing this profession, and it's an incredibly exciting time to be in this profession. Um, we're defining what it is that what we do, and we're defining how we do it. And I believe that we're coming to a new a point of our young burgeoning profession. We're maturing, and
mhm,
I do think that what you're saying is it's my experience as well. I believe that the textbook is bringing us into the new age of naturopathic oncology, and how we can all have uh, a similar or standardized approaches to specific issues or cancer types. And that's going to help develop this profession in a way that it's never been developed before.
mhm.
It's largely been anecdotal, um, oral, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I will say that one of the reasons why I went into naturopathic medicine was in my undergraduate degree I studied evolutionary biology,
Mhm,
and I have a great deal of reverence for the knowledge that we've gained over thousands and thousands of years. And I do believe humans are intelligent. And, there's billions of plants on Earth, and only hundreds of them have been used medicinally, maybe a couple thousand worldwide.
mhm,
And that was a process of trial and error, and passed on from generation to generation. And there, I have a great deal of reverence for that. And what's quite incredible is when you look at then the science, and now scientists examining these things which have been used for millennia, and finding out mechanistically what is in there that actually has been doing what humans have known it was doing. Um, and then this profession, it has reverence for this historical knowledge that humans have always had, despite the fact that it's not been found in a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trial. But this profession also brings the new knowledge that we've gained through science, and it's a marriage of those two worlds, which
Mhm.
is really a privilege.
Yes. And I think that's a wonderful background, the evolutionary biology and the evolutionary or deep historical perspective that you have. Isn't it interesting that the, some of the most powerful uh, anti-cancer food elements, phytochemicals, are in the most traditional plants that are sort of foundational for different ancient cultures. I read about an archaeological um, dig where they dug up a pot that was from 1500 years BCE, and in India. And in the pot, they found basically all the makings of curry. In the sense, it was turmeric, it was curcumin, curcumin in the turmeric, of course, and cumin and um, cinnamon and cardamom and different spices and stuff. This was in a 3,500-year-old vessel that was found discarded, in a some area in India. So it just brought home to me, I mean, how ancient the the adoption of the most healing elements are that are now vindicated through the most modern scientific means. And I would also say similar thing with green tea and its position in Chinese culture. When people found these things, it wasn't just that they liked the taste of them. It was that they recognized through their means of discovery, they recognized that these were healthful habits to cultivate, and also they probably taste good because they are good for us, and so it became foundational. These aren't just randomly chosen plants like you were saying. These uh, are foundational elements in culture, and there's a reason why they are. Because I think that this is sort of our external immune system, if you will, that we were evolved in a way to that was dependent upon us eating widely among all these different plants and herbs and so forth.
Absolutely, and that's exactly it. Another dig or finding somewhat recently was that um, person that was found in the Arctic,
Hmm.
frozen, with a little satchel on his body that had uh, medicinal mushrooms
Yes.
and what looked like ancient acupuncture needles on them.
Yeah.
And like how incredible is that? And to ignore that is a mistake in my opinion. And
Hmm.
one of the things that naturopathic medicine does is it we're shepherds of this information that humans have gathered over millennia. And
Yeah.
what a privilege, honor and privilege it is to be the people that are carrying that information forward and sharing it with patients today. Dr. Moss, um, if you think about this, uh, microtubule inhibitors,
Hmm.
the vinca alkaloids, the taxals, the
Hmm.
paclitaxel, docetaxel,
Hmm.
Madagascar periwinkle for the vinca alkaloids, and the yew trees for taxols. Um, these are some of the most widely used chemotherapeutic agents in the world,
Hmm.
and they come from plants. even new drugs like Kadcyla, that new Herceptin conjugated
Hmm.
drug.
Hmm.
So Kadcyla is Herceptin attached to maytansine, which is
Yeah.
from an African shrub,
Yes.
and this is like modern day chemotherapeutic approaches to treating cancer, and we're still relying on nature. The vast majority of the drugs that we use in medicine were originally um, plant based. And you take the plants into the laboratory, find out what's in them, and then synthetically produce those. Um, to create the drugs that are most widely being used to treat cancer conventionally. So
Yes.
I think it's important to bridge, this knowledge from the past to current, and so your
Yeah.
listeners understand that this isn't just an exercise of interest. This is actually how we manage the disease today.
We would like to take a moment to thank our Patreon subscribers for helping to make this program possible. If you would like to have access to exclusive content, including transcriptions, episode recaps, and special offers, become a patron today at patreon.com/mossreports.
But I guess what's nagging in the back of my mind, uh, Dr. Parmar, is we want to be respected. We want to be accepted. We want to be. We want the world to share our vision of the power of natural medicine vis-a-vis cancer and many other diseases. But it seems like we're hobbled by the methodology. That the methodology of testing and validating the effectiveness, safety, and effectiveness of different approaches and compounds. In conventional medicine, it's almost completely reductionist in the sense that you isolate an individual, not just an individual plant, but an individual chemical within that plant. And then you test that. Well, perhaps you'll test it alone, or perhaps you'll test it with combined with one other already established purified chemical. And then you see whether or not the results are better when you use that particular chemical versus two chemicals together. But how do you do that? First of all, natural products have multiple chemicals in them. Green tea has EGCG, but it has a whole host of other polyphenols or polyphenols, some people say. So you've got that. You've got every herb you look at. I mean, there might be 20 or 30 different chemicals, or even I think in red clover, somebody once counted like 130 different chemicals were present. So this is difficult because it goes against the grain, right, of allopathic medicine. And then since you're dealing with essentially non-toxic agents, foods and food derivatives, um, you have the luxury of being able to give multiple agents simultaneously. You also have the luxury of being wrong in the sense that if you slip up and you prescribe, curcumin, for instance, or a chai tea or something. I mean, usually the worst that's going to happen is the person might get a stomach ache if they did an overdose or if they got the wrong thing. But the oncologists don't have that luxury. So it seems like there's sort of, I don't know where that middle ground is, where the meeting point is, where you can convince the oncologist that it isn't more scientific just if they isolate an individual chemical. That might be less scientific because that's not necessarily the best thing for the patient. How do you bridge that gap?
Hey, you're asking such a good question. I've been trying to bridge that gap for 21 years at least. I'll share two things on the heels of what you just said, Ralph. So the first is this. Um, I think there's a major hindrance to advancement of cancer treatment of human beings based on this reductionistic concern that you bring up. Because if all we do is a single variable and test it on an individual dealing with something as complicated as a malignancy, um, it's sure to eventually fail. That's just my humble opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm a big believer in the silver shotgun, not the silver bullet.
Mm.
And coming at cancer from multiple angles is the way I think that we're going to have the most success. And I've shared with you our 8-year study,
Mm-hmm.
which was published by Cambridge scholars, and it's posted on my website, drgurdevparmar.com. Not the one that was published in Cambridge Scholars, but our own internal edited version of the study, which was
Mm-hmm.
an 8-year study, and we looked at the survival outcomes retrospectively of our patients that made use of local regional hyperthermia, fever therapy, and whatever other treatments we were making use of in their particular case. The only variable that was consistent amongst all of the patients in the study was that they made use of local regional hyperthermia. But as you know, in a practice like ours, the way that we treat patients is on an individual basis. So the treatment from one patient to the next is varied.
Mm-hmm.
But what we were able to show was across all 10 of those stage 4 cancer entities, our patients had somewhere between a 2 to 7 time improvement to 5-year survival rates, which is significant and profound. And I had such a difficult time getting this published
Yeah.
because all publications find it too difficult to publish a study that is not a single variable. Um, the last time I went to Germany for a conference, a cancer conference, um, it was in the Stuttgart area.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed a couple of speakers who talked about what's called real world research or real world data,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that's probably the way to bridge the gap is for researchers to take a more real world approach to doing studies, taking into account the complexity of each individual's care, the complexity of their disease, and the complexity of the management of their disease. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I truthfully think that most single variable studies have issues because each and every one of the patients in those studies is taking different drugs to manage their other comorbidities, whether they have
Mm-hmm.
diabetes or hypertension or whatever it is, heart disease, and they take all of these medications to manage those things. Yet they're in a study as a subject that's looking at the outcomes of one agent that they're being treated with. And as you know, I've been for over 15 years using repurposed drugs or off-label drugs. We know, like metformin, aspirin, celecoxib, cimetidine, all of these drugs that are widely used amongst the population have molecular targets and beneficial effects for specific cancers, and to assume that the one drug that the patient is on is the only reason for their outcome, it's not real. So I think the
Mm-hmm.
real world data, the real world research is going to be that bridge that you and I are talking about.
Mm-hmm. We used to call that the black box study, meaning that you could randomize people to get, let's say, conventional therapy, and then the other group would be randomized to go to your clinic. Or this was initially done, by the way, to accommodate the study of the late Nicholas Gonzalez in New York. uh, because he couldn't say exactly what he was going to be giving, because it would vary based upon certain factors in that person and so forth. And this is true of every clinic, I would say, um, but especially true of every non-conventional, or whatever you want to say, naturopathically oriented practice and clinic. So you just say, well, this is a randomized study, but we're sending half the patients to to this other clinic, and we'll see how they do. Now the objection will be, okay, so your patients live 2 or 7 times longer. Now, what was it that did that? That's going to be, and how is that applicable if we're not you? How do we apply that knowledge? And so, I mean, I don't really believe that that's a problem. I think the answer is that you go study with the person and you invite them to your grand rounds, and you have them present their ideas and tell what their methodology is. But that doesn't seem to be happening, or at least maybe I'm just not seeing it, but it really isn't happening all that all that publicly.
It's not happening.
No.
I think it's happening here and there, and I have very specific medical oncologists or radiation oncologists that refer patients to me, but the vast majority don't. Um, there's this feeling in the field that there's evidence-based medicine, and then there's everything else,
Yeah.
and we fall into the category of everything else.
Yeah.
But as I say to each and every one of my patients, Ralph, my responsibility lies in the care of my patient,
Hmm.
and and I feel very comfortable being able to share the wisdom and knowledge of our medicine. Um, and we're in a very unique position. I don't know of any other healthcare providers that are trained in pharmacology. We can prescribe all the pharmaceutical drugs, and we're knowledgeable in pharmacology, but we're also knowledgeable in pharmacognosy. How do all these natural agents work, and then drug to drug, drug to nutrient, drug to herb interactions. And I think it's a shame. You look at all the research that's done. It's somewhere between 70 and 90% of people diagnosed with cancer are making use of uh, other therapies.
Hmm.
Most of them, unfortunately, not telling their oncologists for various reasons, and not under the care of somebody knowledgeable enough to know what is or isn't safe to do
Yeah.
alongside uh, treatment A, B, or C.
Right.
And, I really think that every person living with cancer should have a naturopathic oncologist, a naturopathic physician in cancer care working for them alongside their conventional treatment, or,
Totally,
you
I
know,
totally agree. I totally agree.
have
And I,
everyone.
and I say this now to all my consultation clients. This is this decision that you're about to make about your cancer care is going to be one of the most important decisions of your life. I don't want to tell them it's the most, because it'll scare them, but for many people it is the most, because their life actually, whether they live or die, or how well their remaining years are, is going to be dependent on that decision. And I say, just like you have to seek the best conventional um, medical oncology care, or other kind of oncology care that you can, that's well established. You have to seek out the best quality naturopathic care that you can possibly get. And it could be from an enlightened medical doctor, or it could be from, more likely, from a naturopath, like a fellow of the you are fellow of the American Board of Naturopathic Oncology, FABNO. Or sometimes the members of the OncANP are also very good and very knowledgeable, or other people of high credentials and ethics and knowledge. I mean, there are people, but that decision, first of all, it shouldn't even be an if; it should only be a when, as to doing that. Secondly, that decision is going to be is instrumental in your survival as the decision as to which type of conventional care you're going to receive. And it just becomes so obvious that that's the missing half of their treatment. But I think it's, it's dismaying that the you have two sides. You have two different professions that are practicing oncology. One side, as a rule, is reaching out to the other. That's the naturopathic doctors. And the allopathic doctors seem perfectly content to just go about their business, follow the NCCN guidelines, and hand it over to a nurse or a technician to administer the chemo and then go about their business. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but this is what I see all the time, that there doesn't seem to be a reciprocating side. Uh, Look at the Society for Integrative Oncology. I went on their website the other day, and they've been around, also been around about 20 years now. And I think I counted 59 actual oncologist members of the SIO. ASCO has something like, that's the Conventional Oncology Society, for those who are not aware of those initials, ASCO, American Society for Clinical Oncology. They have something like 40,000 members, maybe
Yeah.
25,000, before COVID, 25,000 were showing up for the annual meeting. Uh,
Yeah.
25,000 versus 50 or 60, or if we want to be generous, maybe there's 100, not even altogether, of the people self-identifying as integrative oncologists. So how do you I don't know how we change this. And then there is the issue, I wrote my whole book about this, Cancer Incorporated, of the wide scale, and I'll call it by what it is, the bribery of the leadership of the standard oncology profession by the pharmaceutical industry, the wide scale payoffs that go to the standard oncologists. So they're no longer even neutral arbiters. They're basically active participants in pushing this very narrow pharmaceutical model. So how do we overcome that? What's the pathway to, I won't say victory, because we're not trying to overcome another profession, but how do we get this issue before the public so that people will demand that these things be integrated?
I think it has to be a grassroots um, movement. I think it has to come from the patients, and the patients demand this care.
Mhm,
I don't see it coming from the medical establishment as it stands.
mhm,
Um, so I really believe that the ultimate answer to your question is that there needs to be a grassroots movement. There needs to be our profession needs to do a better job of getting our information out there. Our profession needs to do a better job of sharing our outcomes. Our profession needs to do a better job of um, educating the public. Ultimately, um, and I don't know what else is going to do it, Dr. Moss. I don't see it coming from a conventional medical perspective that there's going to be this acceptance to incorporating all of these other approaches.
mhm,
It hasn't happened yet, and it doesn't. I've been doing what I'm doing now for 21 years, and I have spent all these years sending consultation letters to my patients, medical oncologists or radiation oncologists or surgeons, and the vast majority of the time, my patients are told that the oncologist is recommending against whatever therapies, not
yeah,
because they know, just because they don't know.
mhm,
And that's actually what they'll tell the patient is, I don't know how this is going to do with this. I don't know how this is going to work or not. I don't know whether this is going to have some sort of interaction. So therefore, don't do it.
yeah,
Rather than saying, go talk to somebody that does know,
yeah,
it's don't do it. So this, and it seems completely justified. I guess just for self-preservation, as a person that lives with this every day, it can be stressful to deal with this on an ongoing basis, especially when you know what you're doing.
Hmm.
And you have a lot of experience. I've now seen over 15,000 people living with cancer, and I have a very good sense of what does what and what doesn't do what,
Hmm.
alongside whatever. And working from an evidence-based or guided, informed perspective provides a great deal of foundation of feeling comfortable, but then
Hmm.
the experience on top of that.
Yeah.
I really think the people that have made a difference, Dr. Moss, are the patients. When the patients say to the oncologist, "Look, I know you don't know, but I am working with somebody that does,
Hmm.
and this is what I am choosing to do." And I'm hoping that one patient at a time, one oncologist at a time, there's a slow chipping away at this that opens up the ability for people to make use of everything that's available to them that's intelligent, safe, and proven effective, regardless of what stripes they wear. Or, are you
Hmm.
conventional or are you not? Let's
Hmm.
stop talking about it that way and just say there's medicine and there's not medicine. There's stuff that works and there's stuff that doesn't work. And um, I hope the language changes.
Hmm. You are one of the things you've done that nobody thought could be done was that you brought hyperthermia almost single-handedly, I would say, to North America, and not and both the whole body and the local regional hyperthermia, the kind that's practiced in Germany with the Oncotherm devices for the local regional, and I believe the Heckle device for
Correct.
the whole body. And I had, having made 18 trips to Germany to examine their medical system there, I never thought that would happen. I was told explicitly by the uh, the two companies that produce the whole body hyperthermia equipment in Germany that they would not come. They wouldn't even try to overcome the laws in the U.S. about prohibiting whole body hyperthermia, and also the Oncotherm folks. Basically, I was told, well, this would cost us X number of dollars to millions of dollars to bring it into the US because of all the red tape and everything. And why do that when you have eager people in Korea and in China and Japan and Kazakhstan and so forth who are clamoring for your product? So they basically abandoned the North American market. And you haven't brought it to the United States yet. You're going to bring it right to within 15 minutes of the border, I understand. But
Right.
talk about that. Talk about what was involved in getting hyperthermia approved.
Well, I think let's focus on the Oncotherm. The
Yeah.
Oncotherm device process took 2.5 years.
Hmm.
It was a long and arduous process to get Health Canada approval.
Yeah.
Um, uh, like you, I started going to Germany in the early 2000s. I first went to Medicine Week for a conference with my wife Karen.
Hmm.
Um, um, One of the companies, German companies, invited us to attend Medicine Week, and that was my
Hmm.
first introduction to hyperthermia as a treatment. And I was fascinated immediately by it, and there were things about hyperthermia that were very intriguing and exciting. Here's a device that is safe. You're using heat, which, from an evolutionary perspective, made all the sense in the world to me. You're using a treatment that has the ability to damage or kill cancer cells. and do this in a clinical setting that doesn't require a great deal of intervention. This can be safely administered alongside chemotherapy and other chemicals and has a chemosensitizing effect. This can be safely administered alongside radiotherapy and has a radiosensitizing effect. In fact, I'm convinced that few things have a better chemosensitizing or radiosensitizing effect ever than hyperthermia.
Hmm.
So um, I'm a very persistent person, so I got this in my head that this has to be available to people in North America. This is just a shame that people have to go to Europe or Asia to get this treatment. So started the process in 2006 or 7. Took 2.5 years to get Health Canada approval. It was a very a difficult process. It required a great deal of supportive information, evidence, binders and binders of information. Um, and so, at the end of the day, it went right up to the very top of the Health Canada structure to get the approval. And the day that we got the approval was a great celebration. We had about 100 patients waiting for this
Wow.
technology
Yeah.
and writing letters to members of parliament and members of the legislative assembly to request that this treatment be brought into Canada. So these are people dealing with cancer, and they wanted this available to them. So it took a great effort to get it. FDA's been a very difficult beast, and I would say that after several years, we're no further ahead with FDA than we were when we started. And I will also say that it took almost 2 years to get approval by the Mexican authorities. And so we were also successful getting this approved in Mexico. And there are now devices, the Oncotherm devices in Mexico,
Hmm.
which is something that I'm very proud of. This was an effort not for my private practice, not for my own clinical practice, although it was, something that I wanted to include. This was something that I wanted to do for people living with cancer in North America. And we now have about 10 centers across Canada, from British Columbia out to Ontario, that offer Oncotherm, local regional
That's
hyperthermia.
great. Yeah.
It is. It
And
really is.
that'll be a big step up for the Mexican clinics if they can, get and use that. Because I have to anecdotally, I have to say that one time I went to a clinic in Tijuana that advertised that they were doing hypothermia, and their hypothermia device, and I'm not exaggerating, was a $10 heat lamp from Home Depot,
Uh-oh.
nailed onto a board, and they were they were advertising this as local regional hyperthermia. So there's I tell my clients, I mean, there's hyperthermia and then there's hyperthermia. So
Right, right.
it's just a word, you know what I mean? Anybody can use that word, but some of these devices like Oncotherm are highly sophisticated, developed by brilliant electrical engineers and physicists, and some really top genius level minds went into the making of these things. Warburg was involved in the original hypothermia equipment. I don't know if you realize
Yeah,
that, and
I do
and
know that.
and also Issels, and in Germany, some of these devices were developed at a very, very high level in terms of the thinking that went into them. So it is a science. It's been proven through randomized controlled trials in cervical cancer and in sarcoma and pancreatic cancer. Real big multinational, centric trials, and nothing happens. And this was presented at ASCO, and it just died. I mean, just at the time, you could tell nothing was going to happen, and
Yeah.
so it's both amazing that it occurs at all. That trials were done on this. I mean, really top notch randomized trials, and yet it's also very frustrating, I'm sure, to you as well. But you're completely right. The motive for this, the impetus has to come from the lay population, from the patients and the relatives of the patients. And I think so I salute you for having done that and having mobilized your own patients, because they were the ones that the Congress and the different influencers are going to listen to the most. Well, listen, we could talk for hours. I'm so thrilled that we got you on the show, and I hope that you'll come back at some point in the future to, give us some more insights into your practice and what you're doing. But it's a good start, I think.
Yeah, thank you again, Dr. Moss. It's been an honor and privilege. As I said, I'm so pleased to have been on your show, and I'd be really happy to do this with you again. It went so fast. I can't believe
Yeah,
we're
I
at the
know.
end.
I feel the same way. Well, for the Moss Report, this is Ralph Moss.
Thank you for listening to The Moss Report. Visit our website at themossreport.com and subscribe to hear more discussion of cancer treatment options, alternative research, and more. For more information about Dr. Moss and his work, including scheduling phone consultations, go to mossreports.com.